Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the frontier's edge, watching the massive alien ship through the main screen. The ship was 3 times bigger than his own vessel, and covered in strange metal that seemed to shift colors in the starlight. After months of traveling through empty space, humanity had finally found another intelligent species among the stars. "Sir, they're sending a message," said Communications Officer Beth Taylor, her fingers dancing across the control panel. "It's coming through on multiple frequencies." Jake nodded and straightened his uniform. This was the moment that would change everything for the human race. "Put it through, Beth." The screen flickered and showed a tall reptilian creature with golden scales and bright yellow eyes. When it spoke, its voice was deep and cold. "I am War Commander Sektar of the Zephyrian Empire. You will identify yourselves immediately. This is Commander Jake Morrison of the United Earth vessel Frontier's Edge," Jake replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "We come in peace, seeking diplomatic contact with your people." The alien's eyes narrowed and he seemed to look Jake up and down with disgust. "Humans. We have heard whispers of your kind from the outer regions. Primitive mammals who have barely learned to leave their home world." He paused as if deciding whether Jake was worth his time. "You will follow us to Nexus Prime Station. Do not attempt to flee or you will be destroyed." The screen went black, leaving Jake and his crew in uncomfortable silence. Beth looked up from her station with worry in her eyes. "Sir, their weapons. Systems are still active. Should we call for backup?" "No," Jake said after a moment. "We came here to make contact. We're going to see this through." He turned to his navigation officer. "Set course for their station, but keep our weapons ready, just in case." 3 days later, Jake found himself sitting across from Ambassador Lisa Carter in the diplomatic quarters of Nexus Prime. The station was enormous, easily the size of a small city and filled with dozens of different alien species. But it was clear that the Zephyrians were in charge of everything. "The situation is not good, Jake," Lisa said, reviewing the files on her tablet. "I've been talking with their representatives for 6 hours, and they see us as nothing more than another species to conquer. They've done this to 47 other civilizations." Jake rubbed his temples, feeling a headache coming on. "What do they want from us?" "Complete surrender. They want us to give up all our colonies, submit to their rule, and provide them with workers and resources. In return, they promise not to wipe us out completely." Lisa's voice was bitter. "They call it being generous." Before Jake could respond, the door chimed and a small, nervous-looking alien entered. Unlike the proud Zephyrians, this creature had gray skin and large, worried eyes. "Excuse me," he said in accented English. "I am Dr. Alex Bennett. I study different species for the Zephyrian Science Council." Lisa looked suspicious. "What do you want, Doctor?" Alex glanced around nervously, then moved closer to their table. "I have been studying your people for several months now. I have tried to warn the High Council, but they will not listen to me." He pulled out a small device and showed them a holographic display. "Look at this data. Humans are different from every other species we have encountered." The hologram showed charts and graphs that Jake didn't fully understand, but Alex continued, explaining, "Other species, when faced with superior force, they surrender or fight in predictable ways, but humans—" He shook his head in amazement. "Humans adapt. You find new ways to solve problems. You work together even when you disagree about everything else. The Council thinks this makes you weak and chaotic, but I believe it makes you dangerous." "Dangerous how?" Jake asked. "Because you never give up. Every other species we have conquered accepted their fate when they realized they could not win. But human history shows that you keep fighting even when victory seems impossible. You find ways to turn weakness into strength." Alex looked directly at both of them. "The High Council believes you will surrender like all the others. I do not think they understand what they are dealing with." Lisa leaned forward. "Doctor, are you willing to help us?" Alex was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "The Empire has become cruel and proud. Perhaps it is time for them to learn that they are not as superior as they believe." 2 weeks later, Captain Ryan Davis stood in the command center of the human fleet, looking at the 12 ships that represented Earth's entire space navy. Across from them hung the Zephyrian war fleet, over 100 massive vessels that could probably destroy every human ship without breaking formation. "Captain Davis," came the cold voice of War Marshal Kethron over the communication system. "I trust you have come to deliver your species' surrender." Ryan took a deep breath. Behind him stood representatives from every human colony and Earth itself. President Helen Brooks had given him clear instructions. Try diplomacy first, but be prepared for the worst. "War Marshal, we're here to negotiate a peaceful solution. Surely there's room in this galaxy for both our peoples to exist without conflict." "Da-dine." Sound that came through the speakers might have been laughter, but it was harsh and mocking. "Negotiate? You have 12 small ships and a population that could not fill one of our cities. What do you possibly have to negotiate with?" "Our freedom," Ryan said simply. "We're not asking for much. Let us keep our colonies and trade routes, and we'll stay out of your territory. We don't want war. But you will have war regardless," Kethron replied. "This is not a negotiation, Captain. This is us being generous enough to give you a chance to surrender with dignity. You have 30 of your Earth days to consider our offer. Submit completely to Imperial rule, or we will take what we want by force." The communication ended, leaving Ryan staring at the overwhelming enemy fleet. His tactical officer, Colonel Sam Mitchell, moved up beside him. "Sir, our analysis shows we can't win a direct fight. They outgun us, outman us, and have centuries more experience in space warfare." Ryan nodded grimly. "I know, Sam. But Alex, Bennett was right about one thing. We're not like the other species they've conquered." He turned to address the bridge crew. "Send a message to all human worlds. Tell them to begin emergency preparations, and tell them something else." He paused, thinking of all the human history he had studied, all the times his people had faced impossible odds. Tell them that being outnumbered is nothing new for humans. Tell them we've beaten worse odds before. As the human fleet began its journey back to Earth, none of them noticed the small probe that had been watching their entire meeting. "Dr. Alex." Bennett reviewed the recording from his laboratory on the Zephyrian homeworld. The human captain's words had been confident, but Alex had seen the fear in their eyes. Yet somehow that fear didn't seem to break their determination. Alex turned to his research notes about human history. Wars where tiny armies defeated massive empires. Revolutions that succeeded against overwhelming force. Scientific breakthroughs made by people who refused to accept that something was impossible. The more he studied humans, the more he understood why they were different. Other species fought until they calculated they could not win. Humans fought until they won or died trying. The Zephyrian Empire was about to learn the difference, and Alex suspected it would be a lesson they would never forget. War Marshal Kethron stood in the command center of his flagship, watching the holographic display of human space. 28 days had passed since his ultimatum, and the humans had not responded. Their silence could only mean one thing. They were preparing to fight a war they could not possibly win. "Marshal," said his second-in-command, Commander Yextal, "our scouts report increased activity around human colonies. They appear to be moving civilians and resources." Kethron's scaled lips pulled back in what might have been a smile. "Exactly. As expected, they are panicking, trying to hide their weak and helpless populations. Begin the first phase of attacks. Target their outer colonies first. When they see how easily we crush their defenses, they will surrender." The first target was New Denver, a mining colony on the edge of human space. The attack began at dawn, with 3 Zephyrian cruisers dropping out of hyperspace and immediately opening fire on the colony's small defense station. Within minutes, the station was destroyed, and landing craft were heading for the planet's surface. But something was wrong. As the Zephyrian troops landed, they found the colony nearly empty. Most of the buildings were abandoned, and the few humans they encountered seemed to be running away in panic. It looked like a complete victory, but Commander Vexmore, leading, the ground forces felt uneasy. "Sir," reported one of his officers, "we have secured the main mining facility, but something is strange. The equipment is all still here, but it has been modified in ways we do not understand." Before Vexmore could respond, explosions began erupting throughout the colony. The modified mining equipment had been turned into massive bombs, and the humans had timed them perfectly. In the chaos that followed, small groups of human defenders appeared from hidden positions, attacking with weapons that seemed primitive, but were surprisingly effective. Captain Maria Santos crouched behind a pile of mining equipment, watching Zephyrian soldiers running in confusion as more explosions rocked the colony. She had volunteered to stay behind with 50 other defenders while the rest of the colonists evacuated. Their job was not to win, but to make the Zephyrians pay for every victory. Team 3, hit their supply depot now, she whispered into her communicator. Team 5, wait for my signal, then take out their communications array. The Zephyrians had better weapons and armor, but they were used to fighting other species that met them in open battle. Maria's people fought like ghosts, appearing from nowhere, striking fast, and disappearing before the enemy could respond. They used the harsh environment of the colony to their advantage, setting traps in the underground tunnels and using the frequent dust storms to mask their movements. By the time the Zephyrians finally secured the colony, they had lost nearly a third of their forces. It was technically a victory, but it felt nothing like the easy conquests they were used to. Meanwhile, on the mining colony at Port Harrison, engineer Tony Rodriguez was leading what appeared to be a chaotic evacuation. Thousands of colonists were loading onto transport ships in what looked like complete panic. Zephyrian observers, watching from a distance, reported that the humans were fleeing in terror. But Tony's evacuation was anything but panicked. Every detail had been planned weeks in advance. The colonists, who looked like they were running in fear, were actually following precise routes that took them past hidden supply caches and communication centers. As they left, they were collecting intelligence data and planting surveillance devices that would help monitor Zephyrian movements. Remember, Tony told the last group of evacuees, act scared, but keep your eyes open. We need to know everything about how they operate. The transport ships that appeared to be fleeing in random directions were actually following carefully planned routes to secret bases that the Zephyrians didn't know existed. What looked like a panicked retreat was really a strategic withdrawal that left the humans in a better position to fight back. Dr. Nina Clark worked frantically in her laboratory deep beneath the surface of Mars. The Red Planet had become humanity's secret research center, hidden from Zephyrian sensors by the planet's natural magnetic interference. Around her, teams of scientists and engineers were working around the clock to understand captured Zephyrian technology. The good news, Nina said to her team, is that their technology is very advanced. The bad news is that it's also very predictable. Look at these weapon systems. They're designed for maximum efficiency, but they all follow the same basic patterns. Her assistant, Dr. Carol Murphy, looked up from her workstation. It's like they built everything from the same blueprint. No creativity, no variation. They just made everything bigger and more powerful. Nina nodded. That's exactly their weakness. They've conquered so many species using the same tactics that they can't imagine anyone fighting differently. Their computers are programmed to counter every known form of resistance, but only the forms they've seen before. On the other side of the laboratory, teams were working on something else entirely. Instead of trying to match Zephyrian technology, they were developing something completely different. Human ships were being retrofitted with modular systems that could be reconfigured during battle. The idea was simple. If the enemy couldn't predict what you were going to do, they couldn't prepare for it. Admiral Kevin Wright sat in the war room on Earth, surrounded by holographic displays showing human space. The displays looked grim, red markers showing Zephyrian victories, evacuation routes marked in blue, and very few green areas showing human-controlled space. But Kevin was not discouraged. Gentlemen and ladies, he said to the assembled military, leaders, Protocol Nightfall is now in effect. We are not going to fight the Zephyrians the way they expect us to fight. We are not going to meet their fleets in open battle or try to hold territory that they can simply overwhelm with superior numbers. General Peter Kane leaned forward. What are you proposing, Admiral? We're going to fight like humans, Kevin replied. Fast, unpredictable, and annoying. Every time they think they understand our strategy, we're going to do something completely different. We're going to turn their size and organization against them. Communications Officer Beth Taylor, who had been transferred to Earth's command center, stood up. Sir, I've been in contact with resistance cells on the occupied worlds. The colonists who stayed behind aren't just hiding, they're actively sabotaging. Zephyrian operations, equipment failures, supply shortages, communication breakdowns. The Zephyrians are starting to realize that occupying human territory is harder than conquering it. Kevin smiled grimly. Excellent. Phase 2 of our plan can begin. Beth, send a message to all human forces. Tell them it's time to show the Zephyrians what happens when you underestimate humanity. Back on his flagship, War Marshal Kethrin was beginning to feel concerned. The first phase of the invasion had succeeded, but not in the way he had expected. His forces had captured several human colonies, but the victories felt hollow. The humans were not surrendering, they were not begging for mercy, and they were certainly not acting like a defeated species. Marshal, Commander Yextal approached, with a worried expression. We are receiving reports from all occupied territories. Our forces are experiencing constant harassment from human resistance fighters. Supply lines are being attacked, equipment is malfunctioning, and our troops are reporting that they feel like they are being watched constantly. Kethran's eyes narrowed. This is not how conquered species behave. When we defeated the Altarians, they accepted our rule within days. The Centaurians surrendered completely after losing their first major battle. Why are these humans still fighting? Perhaps, Yextal said carefully. Dr. Bennett's warnings were correct. Perhaps humans are different from the other species we have conquered. For the first time since the war began, Kethrin felt a small flicker of doubt, but he pushed it aside. The Zephyrian Empire had never lost a war, and they were not going to start now. He would simply have to hit the humans harder until they learned to submit like everyone else. What Kethrin did not realize was that hitting humans harder had never made them surrender. Throughout their history, it had only made them more determined to fight back. Chief Engineer Lucas Morgan stood in the shipyard above Earth, watching as workers put the finishing touches on humanity's new fleet. The ships looked nothing like traditional human vessels. Instead of the clean, simple designs they had used, before, these new ships were covered in modular sections that could be moved and reconfigured during battle. It's ugly, said his assistant, watching a particularly strange-looking cruiser drift past their observation window. Lucas smiled. Beauty isn't the point. Survival is. These ships can change their weapon layouts, engine configurations, and even their basic shape within minutes. The Zephyrians program their battle computers to predict enemy behavior based on ship design. Our ships will be different every time they encounter them. The first test of the new technology came sooner than expected. Captain Diana Foster was leading a small squadron near Titan Station when 3 Zephyrian cruisers dropped out of hyperspace. The enemy ships immediately began their standard attack pattern, launching missiles and moving into formation based on their analysis of human ship capabilities. But Diana's ship, the Defiance, was not behaving like a normal human vessel. As the two Zephyrian missiles approached, the ship's hull sections began sliding and rotating. Weapon ports that had been facing forward moved to the sides. New armor plating extended from hidden compartments, and the entire ship seemed to fold in on itself, before expanding again in a completely different configuration. Zephyrian vessels, Diana broadcast on all frequencies. You are targeting Earth vessels. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. The response was predictable. Human ship, you are outnumbered and outgunned. Surrender now and your crew will be treated according to Imperial law. Diana's response was to fire every weapon her ship had, but not at the enemy vessels. Instead, she targeted the space around them, filling the area with debris, electromagnetic pulses, and sensor-jamming particles. Within seconds, the Zephyrian ships found themselves flying blind through a cloud of obstacles. What happened next made no sense to the Zephyrian battle computers. The human ships began moving in patterns that seemed random, but were actually carefully coordinated. They would appear from one direction, fire a few shots, then disappear into the debris cloud and emerge somewhere completely different. The Zephyrians were fighting an enemy that refused to stay in one place or use predictable tactics. By the time the battle was over, 2 of the 3 Zephyrian cruisers were destroyed, and the third was fleeing back to Imperial space. Diana's squadron had not lost a single ship. Word of the victory spread quickly through human space, but it also reached the network of alien resistance fighters that Dr. Marcus Thompson had been secretly organizing. Marcus had been working with prisoners of war from other species the Zephyrians had conquered, and he had discovered something important. Many of these species were tired of Imperial rule. The key, Marcus explained to Admiral Wright during a secure communication, is that the Zephyrians rule through fear and overwhelming force, but their empire is actually much more fragile than it appears. They have to keep dozens of conquered species in line, and that requires enormous resources and constant vigilance. On a captured Zephyrian transport ship, Marcus met with representatives from 6 different alien species. There were the Altarians, who looked like tall, thin birds with silver feathers. The Centaurians resembled large insects with multiple arms and compound eyes. The Valdorians were plant-like beings who communicated through chemical signals. "For too long," said the Altarian representative, "we have accepted that resistance was hopeless. But you humans have shown us something we had forgotten: the value of fighting even when victory seems impossible." The Centaurian clicked its mandibles in agreement. "Your species uses tactics we never considered. You make weakness into strength, chaos into advantage. Perhaps it is time for all of us to remember how to fight." Marcus smiled. "We're not asking you to fight our war for us. We're asking you to fight your own war. Every species that rises up makes it harder for the Zephyrians to focus their forces against any one enemy." Intelligence Officer Amy Patterson was working on an even more ambitious project. From her hidden base in the asteroid belt, she had managed to hack into the Zephyrian communication network. The aliens used quantum-encrypted channels that were supposed to be impossible to intercept, but they had made one crucial mistake. They assumed no one would be creative enough to find an indirect approach. Instead of trying to break the encryption, Amy had figured out how to trace the quantum signatures of the messages themselves. She could not read what the Zephyrians were saying, but she could track where the messages were going and how often they were being sent. This gave her a complete map of their command structure and supply lines. "Look at this," she showed her team, pointing to a holographic display of message traffic. "Every order has to go through their central command network. Every supply request, every tactical decision, every personnel transfer. They've created the most efficient military communication system in the galaxy, but efficiency has a price." Her assistant, a young programmer named Dave Wilson, looked confused. "What kind of price?" "Flexibility," Amy replied. "Their system works perfectly as long as everything goes according to plan. But if you introduce enough chaos into the network, if you force them to handle too many unexpected situations at once, the system starts to break down." Amy's plan was elegant in its simplicity. Instead of trying to destroy Zephyrian communication systems, she would flood them with false information. Fake supply requests, contradictory orders, emergency signals from non-existent battles. The Zephyrian commanders would waste time and resources responding to threats that did not exist, while missing the real dangers. General Peter Kane was preparing to test Amy's strategy with Operation Wildfire. Instead of one large attack that the Zephyrians could easily counter, he had planned dozens of small simultaneous strikes across their territory. Each attack would be different, targeting a different type of facility and using different tactics. "The beauty of this plan," Peter explained to his officers, "is that there is no single strategy for them to counter. Every strike team will operate independently, using whatever approach works best for their specific target. Some will use stealth, some will use deception, some will use direct assault. The Zephyrians will have to develop a different response for each attack, and their rigid command structure is not designed to handle that kind of complexity." On Earth, Dr. Carol Murphy was putting the finishing touches on humanity's ultimate weapon. It was not a bomb or a gun, but something far more dangerous to an empire built on order and predictability, a weapon based on chaos theory. The Zephyrian Empire is like a giant machine, Carol explained to President Helen Brooks during a top-secret briefing. Every part depends on every other part working exactly as designed. Their strength comes from their ability to coordinate. Millions of soldiers and thousands of ships across hundreds of worlds. And your weapon? The president asked. Introduces controlled chaos into their system. Small changes that cascade into bigger changes, which create even bigger changes. Like dropping a pebble into a still pond, except the ripples keep getting bigger instead of smaller. Carol's eyes gleamed with scientific excitement. Their own efficiency becomes their weakness. Meanwhile, War Marshal Kethron was discovering exactly what Dr. Bennett had tried to warn the Empire about. Every victory against the humans cost more resources than expected. Every occupied territory required more troops to maintain control. Every battle plan had to be rewritten because the humans kept doing things that made no tactical sense. They are not fighting like any species we have encountered, he admitted to High Chancellor Vextar during an emergency council meeting. Our battle computers cannot predict their movements because their movements appear to be random. Our occupation forces cannot maintain order because the humans refuse to accept that they have been conquered. Vextar's golden scales darkened with anger. Are you telling me that our mighty empire cannot defeat a species that has barely learned to travel between stars? I am telling you, Kethran replied carefully, that this war is not proceeding as we anticipated. Perhaps it is time to consider Dr. Bennett's original assessment of human capabilities. But it was already too late for caution. Across the galaxy, human-inspired rebellions were beginning on dozens of worlds. The careful order that had held the Zephyrian Empire together for centuries was starting to crack, and the cracks were spreading faster than anyone could repair them. High Chancellor Vexitar stood in the throne room of the Zephyrian homeworld, watching reports flood in from across the galaxy. Red warning lights flashed on displays showing rebellions on 17 different worlds. Supply lines were cut on dozens of trade routes. Communication networks were failing as Amy Patterson's chaos virus spread through their quantum channels. How is this possible? Vextar demanded, his golden scales now dark with rage. We are the Zephyrian Empire. We have ruled this galaxy for 1,000 years. Dr. Alex Bennett, who had been summoned to explain the crisis, stood quietly in the corner. After months of being ignored, the Empire's leaders finally wanted to hear his warnings about humans, but now it might be too late. Chancellor, Alex said carefully, I tried to tell the Council that humans were different. They do not think like other species. When faced with impossible odds, most species calculate their chances and surrender. Humans calculate their chances and find new ways to improve them. On the bridge of the Liberation Fleet heading toward Proxima Centauri, Captain Steve Adams watched the massive Zephyrian fortress growing larger on his screen. The fortress was supposed to be impossible to attack, protected by energy shields, and surrounded by defensive stations. But Steve had learned something important during this war. Impossible was just another word for, no one has tried the right approach yet. All ships, this is Captain Adams, he broadcast to his mixed fleet of human vessels and alien rebellion ships. Remember, we're not trying to destroy the fortress. We're trying to get inside it. Teams Alpha through Delta will create diversions at these locations. He highlighted points on the tactical display. Teams Echo and Foxtrot will use the chaos to infiltrate the lower levels. The attack began with what appeared to be a standard frontal assault. Zephyrian defenders responded exactly as their training dictated, moving ships and weapons to counter the obvious threat. But while they were focused on the loud, visible attack, smaller human ships were slipping through gaps in their defenses, using stealth technology borrowed from the Altarians. Inside the fortress, the infiltration teams moved quickly through maintenance tunnels and service corridors. They were not there to plant bombs or steal information. Their mission was much simpler and much more devastating. They were there to open the front door. 20 minutes after the battle began, the fortress's main shields suddenly deactivated. The defensive stations stopped firing. The communication arrays went silent. The massive, impregnable fortress had been turned into a helpless target by a handful of humans who had walked in through the back door. But Steve Adams did not order his fleet to destroy the defenseless fortress. Instead, he broadcast a message on all frequencies. Zephyrian forces, this is Captain Adams of the Liberation Fleet. You have 60 seconds to evacuate all civilian personnel from the fortress. We will not target evacuation ships. The Zephyrian commander, trapped in his own fortress, was shocked by the offer. You are giving us time to escape? We're giving civilians time to escape, Steve corrected. Military personnel can surrender or fight. But we don't make war on people who cannot fight back. On Earth, Dr. Carol Murphy was making final preparations for the Chaos weapon. The device itself was surprisingly small, no bigger than a briefcase, but its effects would be felt across the entire Zephyrian Empire. President Helen Brooks stood beside her in the secure bunker, waiting for the final authorization codes. Once we activate this, Carol explained, there's no going back. The weapon will target their central command network and introduce cascading failures throughout their entire communication system. Ships will lose contact with headquarters. Supply convoys will be sent to the wrong locations. Military units will receive contradictory orders. Will it kill anyone? The president asked. Not directly, but their empire will collapse into chaos. Some Zephyrian forces might fight each other because they don't know what's happening. Others might surrender because they think the war is already over. The weapon doesn't destroy their ships or weapons. It destroys their ability to coordinate. Them. President Brooks thought for a moment about the millions of people throughout the galaxy who were depending on this moment. Do it! Carol activated the device, and across the galaxy, the Zephyrian Empire began to tear itself apart. On the homeworld, War Marshal Kethran watched in horror as his carefully organized military machine disintegrated. Orders were being sent to the wrong fleets. Supply ships were delivering weapons to agricultural worlds and food to military bases. Entire battle groups were flying in circles because their navigation systems had received conflicting destination codes. Sir, his communication officer reported, we're receiving surrender requests from the Vega sector, but our records show we don't have any ships in that area. We're also getting victory reports from battles that were supposed to happen next week. Kethran slammed his fist on the command console. Get me a direct line to High Chancellor Vextar. We need to coordinate a response to this chaos. I'm sorry, sir, but the Chancellor's communication codes are showing as invalid. The system says he doesn't exist. As the Empire crumbled, Ambassador Lisa Carter was leading a very different kind of fleet toward the Zephyrian homeworld. Her ships included not just humans, but representatives from every species that had been conquered by the Empire. The fleet was not coming to destroy the Zephyrians, but to offer them something their empire had never offered anyone else. A choice. This is Ambassador Carter of the Coalition of Free Species. She broadcast on all frequencies as her fleet approached. The homeworld. We are not here to conquer or destroy. We are here to offer the Zephyrian people the same thing we offer all species. The chance to join a galaxy based on cooperation instead of domination. On the surface of the homeworld, millions of Zephyrians watched the approaching fleet. For the first time in their history, they were the ones facing superior numbers and firepower, but instead of death and destruction, the alien fleet was offering them peace. Admiral Kevin Wright, commanding the military escort for Lisa's diplomatic mission, received a priority message from the planet's surface. Admiral, this is War Marshal Kethran. I request permission to come aboard your flagship. I believe it is time for the Zephyrian Empire to hear what Dr. Bennett has been trying to tell us. An hour later, Kethran stood in the conference room of the human flagship, facing the species he had once planned to conquer. Around the table sat representatives from dozens of different worlds, all working together despite their vast differences. I do not understand, Kethran said finally. You have defeated us completely. Our empire is in ruins. Our fleets are scattered. Our communication systems are destroyed. Why do you offer us peace instead of demanding our surrender? Lisa Carter smiled gently. Because that's what humans do. We don't fight to destroy our enemies. We fight to protect our friends. And we believe that former enemies can become future friends if given the chance. Dr. Alex Bennett, who had been invited to attend the meeting, spoke up. Marshal, this is what I was trying to tell the Council. Humans are dangerous not because they are violent, but because they are hopeful. They believe that any problem can be solved. Any enemy can become an ally. Any situation can be improved. That kind of thinking is the most dangerous force in the universe. Dangerous to empires built on fear and hopeless to those who believe change is impossible. 5 years later, the former Zephyrian territories had become the heart of the new Galactic Coalition. Species that had been enemies for centuries were working together on projects that would have been impossible under the old empire. Trade routes connected distant worlds, cultural exchanges brought different peoples together, and scientific collaboration led to discoveries that benefited everyone. Dr. Bennett, now serving as the Coalition's chief advisor on interspecies relations, often reflected on how different things might have been if the Empire had listened to his warnings. But he had learned something important from watching humans. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to a failing system is for someone to show it a better way to exist. The galaxy had learned that evolution favors not the strongest or the most advanced, but those who can adapt, cooperate, and find hope even in the darkest circumstances. And in a universe full of wonders and dangers, that was the most human trait of all.